I recently finished one of the more unusual games that I've played in a while, HELLBLADE: Senua's Sacrifice, and I'm ready to give you my final opinions. Please note that I did receive a review copy of this game through GOG, so bear that in mind when you are evaluating my opinions. Let's just start with how this game is a little different to the other games I have played. It's basically the story of a young lady called Senua who is trying to battle her way through hell to free the soul of her slain love. Senua is also suffering from mental illnesses, so pretty much everything I just said is probably not true. That should give you some idea of what this game is like. It feels like a fantasy game, but at some level you're always aware that it's not. It's actually a game where the demons you fight are the ones in your head.
Because once you gaze into the relentless darkness, all that lurks within it can see you too.
And that's not just a backdrop for the game to be played in, it's a central theme. The authors of this game really want you to understand what it is like to suffer this sort of mental illness, and they do a great job. You will find yourself getting really irritated by the voices, arguing with them, and yet at times relying on them, needing them. It's really very different. It has such a unique feel to it that it's very difficult to put this game in any one category. This game is very linear. It really doesn't give you too much freedom. You will be traveling the path that is set for you. There's one point where you can choose to do one area before the other, but overall you will be traveling from place to place, doing certain things, solving puzzles, having fights, but you will be doing them probably in a similar order to everybody else. This game is very much about the story that's being told as you progress. Now, some people have said it's a walking simulator, but that is just not true. There are plenty of gameplay elements. You will have to concentrate when fighting. The puzzles are engaging enough to require some thought, although they're not too difficult. It is a game, but it's pretty linear. It's not the longest game. It probably takes about 8 hours, maybe up to about 10 if you really take your time and try to do everything. But it is a fairly cheap game. I believe it's about $30 depending on your local currency, so it's definitely worth the money. Visually, this game is staggering. It is amazing. It's not just how good the world looks, it's the style of the game, the camera work, the way you follow Senua, even though you're kind of in her head, you're also outside, but the vision is always a little more restricted than it would be in other such games where you play over the shoulder, and this is used to very good effect. It can keep you off balance, it can hide things from you, especially in combat. The animations are superb, and the game transitions from gameplay to cutscene absolutely seamlessly. You have a hard time noticing those shifts. They're so well done, and you feel like you're playing in a movie the entire time. A very dark and tragic movie, but a movie nonetheless. And throughout the game, you'll be picking up little pieces of lore. You will be hearing stories told in your head by a voice in your head, and it will be telling you things about the Norse mythology. It will be telling you some really interesting stories. But you'll also be getting flashbacks and memories so that you begin to piece together Senua's story. And of course, there are the voices in your head that are constantly nagging you, encouraging you, putting you down, and genuinely keeping you feeling on the edge of madness.
The Northmen tell this story. Before the earth was created, there was a world called Muspel.
As I mentioned, the puzzles are actually pretty interesting, and they do suit the game, the world. They will require a little bit of thought, but not too much. The combat, on the other hand, is unbelievably engaging. It feels a little clumsy at first. In fact, it can feel clumsy throughout the entire game, but I think that's deliberate. You'll find it very hard to keep all the enemies in sight as they try to flank you, and they will try to do that, and it keeps you constantly nervous. But there's something about the combat that is incredibly satisfying. The feeling of impact when you get hit is incredible, but when you land a blow, oh my god, it feels good. There are a variety of enemies, and each one needs to be handled a little differently. Some require fast attacks, some require strong attacks, some require that you dodge, some require that you block and get the timed blocks perfectly, which, by the way, when you get those blocks dead on and time seems to slow down and you get that little ching sound, oh my god, does it feel good. And in general, when you're fighting, once it's over, your entire body is flooded with adrenaline. It feels great, and it's really hard to put your finger on what it is about it that feels so good. It just does. And again, the voices will actually help you out.
There are too many of them. Find strong position.
They will be telling you something's attacking from behind. You'll hear them go, "Watch out, behind!" and you'll dodge out of the way. Or they'll tell you when you need to focus, or they'll tell you when you need to do different things. You should try and listen to them, although it's not always easy in the middle of a fight. They can actually be amazingly helpful in those stress moments. It's odd because this game is really about the story. It stands and falls on its atmosphere and its storytelling, and yet somehow they managed to make the combat really memorable. That is one aspect of this game that I thoroughly enjoyed. Now, this is a great game, but there were a few flaws, a few moments of frustration. An example of that would be one of the doors very early on would not open for me. I could not figure out how to get it open, even though I had solved the puzzle. In fact, I actually reloaded the game, did it a few times just in case it was something to do with a glitch had happened, and I could not get it to open no matter what I did. And in the end, what I had to do was stand in front of the door and activate, and then move back until I found the exact opening point. It was such a tiny opening point, and I had to be the exact right distance away from it. I didn't have that problem with most doors, but it was a major irritation. But probably the biggest problem I had with the game was the feelings of nausea it invoked in me, and I don't mean because of the material, but because of the game itself. It actually caused me to have a fairly aggressive headache and a massively upset stomach. I tried a variety of things because there were some issues. For example, if you have the higher settings selected, you have motion blur, and I hate motion blur. Now, I did find a way to disable that, but that didn't help. I also noticed that when the frame rate dropped below 60, I got massive stuttering, so the VSync wasn't working very well. I tried a lot of different things. I tried enabling triple buffering, adaptive VSync, and could not get the stutters to stop. So in the end, I had to turn the in-game VSync off, which I generally don't like doing when recording, although I can tell you I didn't notice any screen tearing, so actually that's probably how I would recommend playing the game. And that did help a bit because the stutters were a problem. But what it was in the end was Chromatic Aberration. Chromatic Aberration really hit me hard, and I found from several forums I was not alone. There are a lot of people who find that to be problematic. I found it problematic in other games as well, so it's not just this game. But there was no option to turn it off in-game, well, apart from dropping the settings to the lowest ones, turn the post-processing off, and that makes the game look fairly terrible. It would be nice if a game like this has options for things like motion blur and chromatic aberration. These are the sort of things that do give people problems. I know some people felt the field of view was a bit nauseating, and I can imagine that, but I actually think that was deliberate. I think they wanted to keep your view restricted. They wanted you to see what they wanted you to see and not have that kind of 180 field of view vision that some gamers like. They wanted you to feel a little unaware of what was at the side. So I was okay with that. But some of the more egregious options like motion blur and chromatic aberration, it would have been nice to see an option in the game option, because what I had to do was go off, find some site on the internet, and then figure out how to tweak the INI files. It's not hard, but it's also a little irritating. In spite of these issues though, I really did enjoy this game and I can recommend it without reservation. It's an amazing story, it is tragic, it's well told, the production value is incredible, better than most $60 games, and it's unique. It really was such a different experience that it's going to be one of those games that may well spin off a whole new genre. It's going to be one of those games where we still talk about it in years to come because it really was its own thing. It's very hard to classify, and that's just a great thing.